Michael Jackson once made the whole world look up at the stage, but this time every eye turned toward a room above Neverland. To many people, he is still Thriller, the moonwalk, the king of pop. A man who could make American living rooms go silent with just a few steps. But today's story does not begin with music. It begins somewhere far more private, the upstairs of a home the public never truly left alone. Then came the story of an attic after 17 years, a private part of Neverland brought up again, as if it still held something no one had ever seen. Old images from inside the main house once revealed a few signs strong enough to make people pause. Away upstairs, a code panel area is not meant for guests. Those traces do not offer an answer. They only do what Neverland has always done to the public: pull Michael Jackson off the stage and place him back behind a closed door. So after 17 years, is what makes that attic truly haunting the thing inside it, or the reason the public still wants to open it? The door after 17 years. Michael Jackson's attic. 17 years. Neverland. Those three pieces placed next to each other are enough to pull an old memory back. Not because the public knows for certain what is inside, but because they still have not stopped believing that somewhere in that house there is still a part of Michael that has never been seen. Michael died on June 25, 2009. By 2026, 17 years had passed. Neverland could have rested quietly in old photo archives and real estate files. But every time that name returns, people do not just think of a house. They think of the large gate, the old news broadcasts, and the feeling that behind that property there are still rooms that have never been fully understood. I will not call that attic new evidence when the public facts still do not clearly say what day it was opened by whom and what was really inside. But its pull is real. With Michael Jackson, a private space is never just a private space. A room inside his home can easily be pulled into a larger question: who was the man behind the stage? And does his private life still hold some part the public has never seen? If you remember a time when MTV could make an entire living room stop, you understand why the name Michael Jackson is never just a name. Before the internet cut his life into short pieces of controversy, Michael entered America through television, Thriller, the moonwalk, blazing stages appearances that made an entire generation feel as if pop music had just changed its rules right in front of them. Some people would not call themselves fans, but they still remember the feeling of seeing him move for the first time, as if the stage belonged to him alone. Then that same name appeared in very different frames. Neverland on the news, long-running debates, fans defending him, others doubting him. Michael was the king of pop. He was also a figure America never knew how to settle in its own memory. Neverland made everything heavier. Michael bought the property in 1988 and turned it into a world of his own. A large main house, a lake, a train station, a movie theater, an amusement area, a small zoo. Those things sound more like a park than a private home. In many people's memories, it was where Michael tried to create the childhood he felt he had lost. But after the legal and media storms, Neverland was no longer seen simply as a place of refuge. Every door, every path, every room could be examined like a clue. In a few later stories and allegations around Neverland, the attic appeared as a sensitive detail. The line here has to stay clear. A story is still a story. An allegation is still an allegation. Michael Jackson was found not guilty in the criminal trial in 2005. This video does not use a room to convict him, and it does not use it to erase the controversies that have clung to Neverland for many years. A lock in someone else's house may just be a lock. A dark space on an upper floor may just be a forgotten part of a home. But when it belongs to Michael Jackson, people begin looking inside it for an explanation. They are not always looking for an object. Many times they are looking for a way to decide how they feel about him, all over again. Before stepping up into that attic, I want to take you down across the entire property below. What makes that door feel heavy is not the attic. It is Neverland. Neverland is not a house. From a distance, Neverland looked like a happy place. A train rides a movie theater, a lake, animals, small roads running through a property so large that it was easy to forget this had once been one person's private residence. But that is exactly what made Neverland different from every other Hollywood mansion. It was not designed only to be lived in, it was built like an alternate world. Michael bought the property in Los Olivos, California in 1988 for about $17 million. The property covered about 2,700 acres. For another star, that number might only speak to money. For Michael, it opened up something bigger. After buying it, he did not turn the place into a familiar kind of luxury mansion. He renamed it Neverland, after the land in Peter Pan, where the boy never grows up. A man who had spent almost his entire life under the lights named his home after a place where children are allowed to remain in childhood forever. Inside that property, everything went beyond the needs of a normal home. The main house, the lake, the movie theater, the amusement area, the small zoo, the railroad tracks running around the ranch. Among them was Catherine's station, the train station named after his mother. That detail made Neverland feel less like an expensive toy and more like a world personalized down to the last inch. The place was also designed to control feeling. There were not just rides to look at. There was sound, there were paths, there were symbols. There was an arrangement that made guests feel as if they were not entering a singer's home, but crossing the line between real life and a version of life Michael had built for himself. Around the amusement area, there were once speakers hidden inside rocks playing Childhood, a song with the exact name that all of Neverland seemed to be trying to answer. LaToya Jackson once called Neverland a living fairy tale that Michael created so he could have the childhood and normal life he felt he had never had. I do not want to read Michael's mind for him, but the way this place was built says a great deal. The railroad tracks, the movie theater, the amusement area, the small zoo, the train station named after his mother, and even Childhood. Playing around the entertainment area, all of it made Neverland feel like a space designed to control feeling, not just to entertain. Inside the main house, people who once stepped inside described many traces of the world Michael had chosen for himself. Peter Pan, Disney, Charlie Chaplin, Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor. Figures that belong to film childhood fame, tragedy, and cultural immortality. That space did not just hold objects. It held the images Michael wanted to live beside. A person who had been watched since he was little, who grew up among tour schedules, cameras, audiences, and the music industry, finally surrounded himself with symbols that never grow old. Neverland was once seen by the public as proof of Michael's strangeness. A superstar with his own amusement park. A grown man living inside a Peter Pan world. A ranch in California that felt like a miniature Disneyland. That view is very easy because it stands outside the gate looking in. It sees the rides before it sees the wound. It sees the money before it sees the need to feel safe. It sees the exaggeration before it sees a man trying to rebuild the part of his life he felt had been taken from him. The attic is only a door upstairs. But its weight comes from the entire world below it, a place where every detail had already been loaded with memory. A train station is not just a train station. A movie theater is not just a movie theater. A song playing from a rock is not just background music. All of it belonged to a world Michael built to keep the outside a little farther away. Neverland may have begun as a fairy tale. But this fairy tale had fences, a large gate, vast land staff, guests, its own rules, its own sound, its own railroad tracks. It was beautiful but not exactly light. It was joyful but not completely carefree. The closer you look, the more it feels like a shelter for someone who had been loved too loudly, watched too long, and maybe no longer knew what a normal home was supposed to feel like. Neverland was built to keep the outside world a little farther away. But a property of 2,700 acres was still not enough to block television police lawyers, reporters, and questions that kept moving closer to the gate. When the world entered Neverland, it did not come as a guest. It came as an investigation. From the Ferris wheel to the search warrant, Neverland was built to keep the outside world a little farther away. But at a certain point, that world was no longer standing outside the gate. It arrived with television trucks, cameras, search warrants, the sheriff, lawyers, reporters, and the evening news broadcasts that many Americans still remember. A place once told through trains, rides, and childhood suddenly began to be told through colder words, investigation warrant, charges jury. That shift in color did not happen in silence. In 2003, Martin Bashir's Living with Michael Jackson aired and brought very private parts of Michael's life into the public's living rooms. Viewers were no longer seeing Neverland through magical photos or stories about a private amusement park. They saw Michael sitting inside his own world, talking about his life, while a journalist led them through private spaces that had previously existed only as rumors, rare images, or the imagination of fans. For American television at that time, what appeared on the evening screen carried a different kind of weight than it does now. It did not pass by in a few seconds and disappear into a social media feed. It sat there in the living room among families, on news programs the next day, in conversations at work. What Michael said in the documentary was quickly cut apart, replayed, debated, analyzed. Neverland began to lose the right to be seen as a private world. It became a place people observed as if they were looking for signs. Then, in November 2003, the image changed completely. Police came to Neverland with a search warrant in a criminal investigation. News reports at the time recorded a large search that lasted for many hours, with dozens of police vehicles and many investigators at the ranch near Santa Barbara. Just looking at those images was enough to see the symbolic collapse. The place that once had Catherine Station, rides a small zoo, and its own movie theater now appeared in frames filled with police fences, news cameras, and reporters waiting outside the gate. A search is not a verdict. It does not prove guilt on its own. But television does not only transmit legal files, television transmits images. And the image of Neverland being searched did something no report could soften. It changed the public's feeling about this place. Before that, people could think Neverland was strange, luxurious, hard to understand. After that, many people began looking at it as a place that had to be decoded. You can see the cruelty of fame here. An ordinary famous person can have a private home, a private room, a place where no one is allowed in. With Michael, private space almost no longer had permission to keep its original meaning. A closed door was no longer just privacy. It began to be read as a secret. A large property was no longer just a place to live. It became a map for what the public wanted to believe, wanted to reject, or wanted to find more of. In 2005, the case went to trial in Santa Maria. Michael Jackson was found not guilty in the criminal trial. This part has to be stated clearly, not passed over, not spoken in a half voice. Legally, the criminal case closed with a not guilty verdict. The jury reached its decision, the court ended the case, and Michael left the courthouse amid the noise of a world that had watched every day. But a verdict does not automatically return a property to its original feeling. Neverland had already been put on television, searched, debated, turned into a symbol of a battle over memory. Those who believed Michael saw the verdict as confirmation of what they had defended. Those who did not believe him did not disappear from the debate. The media also did not return Neverland to its old fairy tale image. A place that had once appeared alongside a search warrant would have a very hard time becoming a place of only trains and rides again. After the trial, Michael did not return to live at Neverland. That detail does not need to be stretched out to feel heavy. The place he had bought in 1988, the place he named after Peter Pan, the place with a train station named after his mother, the place where he built a movie theater, a lake, an amusement area, and an entire system of replacement childhood was no longer a place he wanted to come back to. LaToya Jackson once said he did not want to see the place anymore. Even if the wording in a family account may carry emotional color, the result was still very clear. Neverland continued to stand there, but Michael left it. From then on, Neverland was no longer seen through a single gaze. It was not just the King of Pop's private amusement park. It was also not just a location in a legal file. It was both at the same time, and that overlap is exactly what made every detail inside feel heavier. After the gate had been surrounded by television, after police cars had gone in, after the court had closed the case, but not the debate, the public gaze began to move deeper. It was no longer just the outdoor rides. It was no longer just the famous gate. It began to stop at smaller things inside the main house: a wall with a code lock, a cabinet too private away upstairs, a silent part of the space so quiet that people wanted to hear it speak. Behind the cabinet door, in the private room, there is a very different feeling when looking at Neverland from the inside. No more reporters outside the gate. No more news ticker running across the screen. Only rooms that have lost their owner, a wide foyer walls that once held paintings, a living room where a piano once stood, family and friends' photographs, left behind like traces of a life that had been cut off halfway. The front part of the main house still carried the look of a place once used to receive guests. Michael once had paintings, statues, photographs, large decorative pieces, things that showed he did not just live in this house, but also presented part of himself through it. That was the easiest layer of Neverland to understand, the home of a superstar, full of keepsakes, full of images, full of traces of someone who once stood at the center of popular culture. But the deeper you move into the private area, the more the atmosphere changes. At the entrance to the master bedroom suite, there is a security code panel on the wall. To step into that part, you had to be someone who was allowed in. With Michael Jackson, this detail was not strange at all. He lived on a massive property, and for many years he had been surrounded by fans, the press staff, guests, and the media. At that level of fame, security was not an accessory. It was part of life. But after everything Neverland had gone through, a code panel was no longer seen as a simple device. It stood right at the boundary between Michael in public and Michael behind the door. Outside was the man of the stage, the news, the debate. Inside was where he slept, changed clothes, kept personal things, lived the hours without an audience. And with Michael, the part without an audience was always the part the public wanted to see most. His bedroom was described as 2 stories. There was a way upstairs leading to a sleeping loft where the host said Michael once slept. A way up, an upper level, a sleeping area separated from the lower part. It is very easy for the imagination to run farther than the facts. It comes close to the feeling of an attic that this story brings up, but the line needs to stay clear. This was a sleeping loft inside the bedroom, not proof of an attic opened after 17 years. Then came the closet. Not a small closet behind the bedroom, but a large cedar closet, the kind of space made to hold clothes, personal items, performance pieces, things not meant for outside eyes. There, the detail that changed the rhythm of everything was not the clothes. It was behind a cabinet door. When the upper cabinet door was opened, there was another code panel inside. Not in the hallway, not placed at the main door. It was hidden inside the cabinet itself. When the correct code was entered, a locking mechanism opened. On the wall there were 3 locks. Behind them was a secret area inside the closet. The host was not sure what Michael kept there, but it was clear this was not a place anyone who walked into the house could know about. This is the kind of part that can easily be cheapened. A code panel behind a cabinet door. 3 locks. A hidden section of space. If told carelessly, it will immediately turn into a shocking discovery. But a tightly locked place does not automatically become something dark. With Michael, it could have been a place to keep performance outfits, collectibles, documents, gifts, keepsakes, things with monetary value or private value. At his level of fame, locking one part of a closet tightly was sometimes not about hiding a truth from the world, but about holding on to a little control in a life that had almost no privacy left. Neverland was no longer seen by the public in a normal state. After the documentary, the search, the trial, the not guilty verdict, and then Michael not returning to live here, every detail in the main house was placed under a different layer of light. Security began to be read as secrecy. Privacy was read as a clue. A way upstairs made people think of an attic. A locked cabinet door made people want to know what was behind it. Later accounts did mention an attic at Neverland. I am not bringing that detail here to turn it into a conclusion. It only helps explain why the image of a way up an upper level, a closed-off space inside this house, made people stop and look longer than usual. With Michael Jackson, even architecture was no longer seen as architecture. Behind that cabinet door there was no certain answer. Only an empty space that people kept filling with interpretation. No lock was strong enough to shut down the way the public talked about Michael Jackson. A room can hold objects inside, but it cannot keep the story outside still. And many years later, that story was brought back to Neverland, this time not with a search warrant, but with Hollywood cameras. When Neverland was rebuilt. In 2024, people once again walked through Neverland's gate with valid paperwork. This time it was not a search warrant, it was a filming permit. The place that had once been pulled into legal and television files was now brought back by Hollywood as a production location, dialogue scenes, a petting zoo, stunts, equipment, trucks, a shooting schedule from morning until nearly midnight. On the permit, the address 5225 Figueroa Mountain Road appeared, along with a filming schedule from April 15th to May 1st, 2024, with hours from 6 in the morning to midnight. The same road leading back to Neverland, but this time with a production schedule vehicle, convoys equipment, and even helicopters for scenes on Figueroa Mountain Road. That return was not small. Michael is a major project directed by Antoine Fuqua. The person playing Michael is Jafar Jackson, his nephew. Michael's estate is involved in the production process. All of those details make this story feel unlike a side project or an independent documentary. This is a more official version, built with major money music rights, family images, memory, and the pressure of bringing one of the most complicated figures in popular culture back to the screen. When the estate is involved, the story feels closer, but also heavier. Every choice becomes a statement: which scene is kept, which period is left out, which part of Michael is brought before the public. Then, Neverland itself becomes the most uncomfortable part. Some parts of the story connected to old allegations, and the period around Chandler were reportedly cut or revised because of legal restrictions from a civil settlement many years earlier. This part should not be pushed into conspiracy theory. A cutscene does not prove on its own that some truth was buried. But it shows something very real about Michael Jackson. There are parts of his life that are hard to tell, not only because of emotion, but also because of law interests, old agreements, and a public memory split too deeply in two. A film crew can step into the real Neverland. They can rebuild the petting zoo, recreate the paths, place actors inside a space that once belonged to Michael, turn the lights on, where many years earlier television had stood outside the gate. But filming at the real location does not mean telling the whole place. Neverland is not just a backdrop. It is a place where every detail has already been weighed down by history. The train station, the rides, the bedroom, the closet, the cabinet door, the way upstairs. At this point, the issue is no longer just whether Hollywood can make Michael look like Michael. The larger question lies in how a legend is rebuilt after his real life has been debated for so long. A new version can show audiences the music, the stage, the lights, the family, the childhood, the pressure, and the glory. But Neverland remains the hardest part to place inside the frame, because it never represents just one thing. When the film crew left Figueroa Mountain Road, Neverland closed its gate again. But it was no longer the old Neverland. It had gained another version rebuilt for the public to look into. And the final question is no longer which part of Michael Jackson Hollywood chose to tell. The question is, after so many reopenings, was the thing that was lost really only privacy? Or was it the ability to see him as a whole human being? Michael Jackson is not in the attic. After all of it, the attic no longer feels like a place holding the final shock. It feels like an excuse for the public to return to Michael Jackson one more time. A room can hold old boxes, clothes, papers, videotapes, a few private objects. But it cannot hold an entire human being who lived almost his whole life in front of the world's eyes. Michael has been seen in too many forms: the stage, Neverland, the news, the courtroom, the main house, and then the Hollywood version rebuilt afterward. But the more images appear, the harder it becomes for him to rest inside one single memory. But the more versions there are, the harder Michael becomes to place inside a single image. For many people who love him, Michael does not need an attic to be remembered. When he died in 2009, fans gathered outside the Apollo Theater in Harlem, played music, danced, cried, and called his name as if they were calling out a piece of their own youth. Many years later, flowers are still placed at Forest Lawn. Shirts with his image still appear at memorial gatherings. His songs still play at family parties in cars on tribute stages. In the memories of people who grew up with MTV, to them, Michael is not inside a lock. He is inside the music. But after his death, Michael also became something else. A massive legacy managed, sold, protected, and rebuilt. Music catalogs, image rights, contracts, films, stages deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A person dies, but the name keeps operating. And when the memory of a human being becomes an asset that large, it no longer belongs only to anyone's grief. It gets pulled between love, money law, storytelling rights, and the public's need for one more answer. Can a famous person be allowed to keep the part no one can fully explain? Can a private room be just a private room? Or when fame has grown too large, does every remaining dark corner become something the public believes it has the right to enter? If that attic opened, and there were only old things inside, perhaps many people still would not feel satisfied. If there were one strange object inside, people would argue again over what it meant. The problem is not which box was found. The problem is the need for one final piece of evidence to do what the music, the court, the family, the films, and memory have never been able to do. Make Michael Jackson easier to judge, easier to defend, easier to place on one side. Neverland is still there in the public memory as a place that cannot carry only one meaning. Not just a fairy tale, not just a former residence, not just a place once examined, not just a movie set rebuilt. It is the place where one man tried to rebuild childhood, then was pulled by that very outside world into the coldest light. Michael Jackson is not in that attic. He is in the distance between applause and the news, between the love of fans and the suspicion of the public, between a song that still lives and a door people still want to open. And after all these years, perhaps the most haunting thing is not what lies behind the door. It is that we still do not know how to let it close. Neverland does not leave us with a settled feeling. It has music, childhood fame, closed doors, and empty spaces that no one can explain on Michael Jackson's behalf anymore. And maybe that is why this story still has not closed. Not because one room is still hiding the final secret, but because Michael Jackson remains the person the public cannot agree on how to remember. What do you remember Michael Jackson by? First, the music, Neverland, the controversies, or one very personal moment that still stays with you to this day? Leave your thoughts below. And if you want to keep looking back at old stories with more care than judgment, stay with Silent Legends. Some doors, the more they open, the more people feel that something is missing. With Michael, maybe that thing is not in the attic. It is in the silence after the music has stopped, while the public still refuses to leave.
Some opinions expressed in this video may be subjective and reflect the content creator's perspective at the time of production. They should not be interpreted as objective facts or official positions. Legends never truly die, as long as we remember them. If you want to help us keep these stories alive, please subscribe to Silent Legends. What is your fondest memory of this icon? Share it in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. Click this video right here on your screen. It's a journey you don't want to miss. Until next time.